We should be live. Looks like, yes, we are live. YouTube, Periscope, Facebook on the group, Flat Earthers for Hillary Clinton. I'm streaming from that particular group because I want to bring more people over. So if you didn't know, I'm trying to break this mold, and they put you into a mold where if you don't trust the news, you are therefore on the right wing, alt right, the hateful ones with the bowl cuts and the hand signs. So I decided, no, I'm going to go ahead and move us past that, and let's get on the left here. So Flat Earthers for Hillary Clinton is a Facebook group that I think once we get 30 or 40,000 people on here, we might have some clout. We'll do a press release. We'll make some statements. So if you're not a member, I'm going to put a link in the chat below. I generally don't use Facebook except for the purposes of interfacing with the brainwashies and the ones who are voluntarily being surveilled by really, well, let me show you something here. Last night we were talking about Star Trek. We were talking about how they found the Star Trek's emblem on Mars, how they renamed the Starship, or rather the big effing rocket, the BFR, they named it Starship. So I'm looking at these like Star Trek parallels, and here's one that was pointed out to me, and it's pretty creepy actually. But I'm saying it's more than just a coincidence. I think this might actually be intentional because of course data, the word, you associate that with Zuckerberg because he's stealing all your data. Well, the character in Star Wars named Data was an android, as Zuckerberg is also speculated of being a something. But look, he does look kind of droidy. But a number of people have found some shots here where, yeah, it's almost a spitting image. And this just could be another one of these places where they overlap the entertainment with the news media, the fake news, the political news. So this whole drama having to do with your privacy, ultimately, it's almost like an inside joke. I mean, the nose is even crooked in the exact same way. How bizarre. Same? I don't think so, but for all practical purposes. All right, everyone says, yeah, thank you. Shout out to Masad, Cozy Wooden Doors, 88. You're right. It was probably Masad shutting it down. Also, shout out to PewDiePie. We had a couple of shootings I wanted to go over today. Double fatal stabbing case. My initial assessment here on this one. Well, so you have this stabbing. 3 people are stabbed. 2 are dead. And this happened in Nashville. One of the victims is the younger brother of a 49ers football player. So my initial take on it is this. One, I watched the bar scene. I watched the footage of the individuals in question hanging out. It looked like a staged made-for-TV drama, just in my opinion. Right off the bat. I'm just going off of what it looks like because I'm not visually illiterate. Most people say, well, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it matters what they tell you. No, actually, it's both. And if it looks like one thing and they say it's something else, it is what it looks like, generally speaking. There's a reason why that they tell you it's otherwise. It's because they're lying to you. So my first impression, I'm looking at the bad guys in hoodies, and I see here a Nike swoosh in black, very pronounced, which again, this makes me think Saturn. The swoosh is the Saturnian ring. It's the scythe. And we're talking about a knife attack. So the scythe, the knife, the swoosh, this being the solstice. All this seems very conspicuous to me. Reaper symbolism. Also, having it done with knives shows that guns aren't the only problem. So then it becomes a broader discussion. Even if we get rid of the guns, people are just going to stab each other. Even if we get rid of the knives, people are still going to strangle each other. They're always going to come up with something. So now it becomes ultimately about human nature needs more regulation and governance. It becomes about human nature. And the initial scapegoat they've picked out, they've already selected the designated joker, would be the mentally ill. And mentally ill is pretty much you if you don't trust the news. No matter what you do with it, whether you go to extreme religion, extreme Islam, or extreme nationalism, it pretty much means that now you are the threat. So my initial assessment on this one, it brings stabbing into it, broadens the criticism from just gun violence to violence in general. And again, it blames man, which is the real point here. They don't want your guns, they want you to fear your neighbor. Mission accomplished. And then the fact that I see the symbolism here and the night it happens, very suspect. And then, of course, involving a celebrity. This means the message is getting out to the masses over the weekend. Seems fake. Another one, we had shooting in Chicago, 13 deaths. They described the scene as chaos. Whenever I see chaos, I instantly think, okay, well, this is a common word that they use to describe events where it's staged. And it sounds to me like order out of chaos, which is the motto of the 33rd degree. And we talk a lot about how that motto pertains to psychological operations where they supply the jokers, they supply the Batman. You know, this dichotomy, like this is where they bring out the Joker shooter at the Batman movie premiere, or Joker, the name of the guy who did the Boston bombing. Each of these are followed up by big militarized police response where they come out in their Batman costumes. So we've been saying this is part of this thing they play out, this problem reaction solution where they provide the chaos. They provide the order. So the site of the shooting is the chaos. So the news describes this shooting in Chicago as chaos, and then they bring the order. So it says here that this party happened at a memorial for someone who had been killed in April. So again, this was at a site where someone else had already been killed, which makes me think it's probably very hoaxy. The police have already been here. There's already a stage set. Quote, the scene was described as chaotic. The police officers arrived in minutes and assisted before the ambulances could arrive, assisting the wounded, interestingly enough. So when does that happen? Some of the outside shooting was caught on police surveillance video. So the police rendering first aid, that's worth noting here. I mean, there's a shooting, I think it was in Virginia a few months ago, where the police put the victim, who was a crisis actor, on the trunk of the police car, and they pushed the car down the street in full view of the news. And the news said, it's such a chaotic scene that they had to use police cars as ambulances. I mean, really just corny stuff. The whole house there is blood everywhere, 13 shot, ABC 7, chaos. 2 men in custody, 13 shot. Again, the number 13, very significant. December 22nd, the timing. And we're just talking about pattern recognition. You know, they give us their 33s and their 13s. That's all. I'm going through comments. Somebody says they named a constellation after the Enterprise. Yeah, I saw that. They gave us a whole new set of constellations. Shows you how arbitrary it could be. Thomas Groan says, ordinary people don't kill, stab, and strangle others. Soldiers are brainwashed to be murderers. Exactly. Exactly. You nailed it. And the reason why that's an important point is that they use the entertainment, they use movies and video games to convince you you're surrounded by psychopathic, rapacious brutes. So you call for the big police state, you know, so just like they invent terrorists, they invent scary bowl-cutted incels with guns. They've invented this notion that human nature is just so bad. We're just a bunch of apes. They invented it. It's libel. You know blood libel? This idea that, well, you can't say this about this group because it's blood libel, because it's said about their group and they're born bad this way. Well, guess what? We're being blood libeled as a species, the human race. We've all been given this. It's a bit of slander and libel, where they're basically saying, yeah, you're garbage, You stink, you got a carbon footprint, you're sinners, you're worthy of death. You're fallen. And I think this is a big part of the programming too, because if they can get you to accept that, then when they show you these unbelievable scenes on the nightly news, you're really in no position to question it. Hey, you might find this interesting. Morgan Freeman, who plays left handed guitar, kind of like Jimi Hendrix, actually got confused for Jimi Hendrix, and he gives a story about it here.
Let me give you an anecdote about because I did Shakespeare and I was wonderful, uh, but that one play, I had a costume that looked like a harem.
He says he did Shakespeare, right? And the theory here is that he played the role of Jimi Hendrix. And what gives this one away, uh, the girlfriend, the wife, same person. But take a listen.
Type thing, with sash and blousey and I had a huge fro, and they put a band around my head, and I walk out on stage. First preview, audience. I guess it was preview. The free theater doesn't have previews, do they?
Yeah.
Do they?
Oh, yeah.
First preview. Then was the first time they had an audience, and I walk out on stage, and somebody way in the back said, "Sing Purple Haze."
It's not a good start with that.
Okay, so someone thought he was Jimi Hendrix, told to sing Purple Haze. And the theory is that Morgan Freeman is Jimi Hendrix. And here's where this comes from. And this is claimed by a lot of researchers, and it corresponds to this deep fake notion where these death fakers, 27 Club would be an example, the Die Young Club more recently, are often repackaged and given new roles in life. So Hendrix dies 1970, 27, recycled celebrity. Then you got Morgan Freeman, first film, 1971. In light of everything I've been saying, consider the use of the term recycled. I think recycled has occult connotations, and it has to do with the reincarnation cycle. It has to do with this god of death and resurrection, the earth god. Every single Mason is raised to the third degree, which involves a symbolic death and resurrection. And again, the idea of the dying and resurrecting sun god is implicit in this. Also, the word raised, R-A-Z-E-D, may pertain to this as well because we're talking about this Phoenician symbolism. And the phoenix is the same thing. He just dies by incineration or immolation and then is born again. In fact, there's this thing called catharsis on the mall in Washington where in front of the obelisk they actually do a Burning Man ceremony every year now. And it's pretty much in front of a 42-foot statue of the goddess Isis. Then you have someone representing the god who's inflamed or burned in front of the obelisk. This ceremony is the ceremony that we're seeing replayed again and again in all the myths, but this corresponds also, because this one just happened back in May, also in May, in view of the obelisk, there was a 33-year-old man in a USA shirt who set himself on fire in front of the White House. And I didn't even look into that 11-3 thing until I noticed that the ambulance that was blocking the view of this guy until you could see him on the lawn, and this was a Fox News coverage of the event, had a 113 on the side. So for people who are seeing this number being used in predictive scripting, well, I thought, well, this is an example of predictive scripting where you have this guy in a USA shirt burning in front of the White House. He's 33 years old. Here we go. A 33-year-old Indian man has died after setting himself ablaze in front of the White House. But anyway, this happened around the vicinity of the obelisk, and it matches symbolically what they do at the catharsis on the mall. Also worth noting, this is the 33rd year of the Burning Man Festival in Vegas, and this year a 33-year-old man burned, or not burned, but died at that festival. And then, funnily enough, or not so funny, but not funny, haha, but that weekend of the Burning Man Festival, 33 people burned in a boat and were not recovered. I mean, I'm saying this is all fake. It's all meta scripting. Like, this is obviously fake. The police officer just happens to have a fire extinguisher. I mean, it's just so corny. It was captured by TMZ, which phonetically sounds like Tammuz, the Babylonian Christ. All right, I'm going through comments here. Anyway, my point being, the 27 Club, or the death and resurrection ceremonies, pretty much connected to all of these things, would be consistent with someone like Hendrix being recycled into Morgan Freeman, possibly. A more compelling one, I think, that right off the bat gives itself away, is the Limbaugh Morrison connection. So everyone knows Rush Limbaugh as this arch-conservative right-winger, but the theory is that he is none other than Jim Morrison, 27 Clubber, who no one ever saw his body, didn't have an autopsy. When have you ever heard of a 27-year-old dying unexpectedly and not having an autopsy? Okay, here's Rush Limbaugh singing The End by the Doors.
Today on the EIB network, this is our euthanasia update.
Beautiful friend, this is the end. My only friend, the end. I'll never.
This will be a short one. This will be ready on the close.
Again. This is the end.
Our euthanasia.
So there you go. Rush Limbaugh is Jim Morrison, death faker. Now, I don't say that is evidence in itself, but I just wanted to show you that there's quite a bit here, if you dig, that show that there's an overlap. And you have to look at their spouses as well. And someone else also found something interesting about Morrison's father. Here we go. The Lizard King Jim Morrison, death faking, is now king of talk radio, Rush Limbaugh. And guess what? Both of them use golden microphones. What's with that? Kind of like Michio Kaku's 1-inch equation corresponding to Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. And this might be easier for you to accept or grasp if you're not emotionally attached to Limbaugh. Just like the people who are emotionally trauma bonded with Alex Jones refuse to recognize that Alex Jones is Bill Hicks. Like, why does that even challenge you in the slightest? And why do you still call him Alex Jones? Call him Bill Hicks. Call him Chaz Bono. Call him anything but Alex Jones, unless you're on the world stage. I'm not on the world stage. I'm criticizing it from the outside. And there are so many interesting pairs that correspond to these. And the death dates, it's like they do these things on a calendar. For the Limbaugh one, you're probably better off starting with Fat Morrison. You can see it. Matchy Moles. I mean, we've gone through this ad nauseum. FlatEarth.life says, wow, that does look like him. Well, it is him. Mr. Mojo Rising with the golden mic came back. EIB's golden mic. Makes perfect sense. Agitating as a long hair, drug-using Dionysian, admitted to having a Jesus Christ complex. Rush Limbaugh is known to have a Jesus Christ complex, but Morrison goes, after saying that he was going to come back as a conservative type in a suit and tie, but it makes perfect sense. You play the role of the anti-establishment, controlled opposition, and now he's playing the role of the establishment. Friends with George Bush, friends with Donald Trump, knows all the people on the political right, carries water for the Republican Party. He's a political agitator. He agitates all the identity groups on the left. He gives them a reason to exist. He's probably responsible for more a hardline feminism than actual feminist activists because he says all the right sexist things. Find Maragment says, how can they convince people to make that much of a drastic change? Well, here's the thing. Rush Limbaugh is not Rush Limbaugh. Jim Morrison wasn't Jim Morrison. Whoever this guy is, he was groomed for this. Part of this is how the elite rule us, is through their proxies, through their agents. So these deep fakers play multiple roles over a period of time. So I don't think he'd necessarily be attached to them, to one particular one over the other. Let's continue. Another one. The name here, River Phoenix. Again, River Phoenix, Death Faker, comes back as another radio, or this is actually not radio, he's more of a video, but a vlogger, agitator, right winger, anti feminist. Plays into all the psyops, Mark Dice, who originally came out as John Connor. John Connor, then Mark Dice. I mean, it's a character. Mark Dice, like it's like a dumb porn name. Like John Connor, obviously stolen from the Terminator, but another death faker. The Blasey Ford one is probably worth looking at again now too, because here's why it matters. We're trying to show you that these are not like isolated incidents. These are not anomalies. They're all part of the same broad program. So if you look at these two characters, this one's just it's just remarkable. I mean, if you heard what Nixon said about the Bohemian Grove, this would not shock you. But this is the level of, well, disguise we're talking about. Like, this is a bit mind-boggling, I guess, if you don't know how much of this is just kabuki theater. I mean, I knew something was up when I saw how many people were gathered at this particular event, at this made-for-TV drama, where you have the Me Too faction, you have the school shooting victims. You know, you just have all the different groups that are involved in, swaying various demographics and political identity groups, getting their 2 cents in, lambasting the sexist male, talking about our society. It just brings out a lot of agitation. But the idea that he's playing both roles as part of this agitation, that's groundbreaking, but that's pretty much what we're suggesting here. And this has been exposed ad nauseum. Definitely the same person. Now that's very suspect. There's a commenter. There are some commenters who will come in and they will deliberately give us misinformation. So, for example, Dallas Goldbug, who was arrested with copious amounts of meth in his car, points to a lot of connections that just don't make sense logically, even if there's a physical resemblance. And I'm saying, no, there are logical connections. There are narrative structures that make sense because we're looking at characters being inserted onto a stage. There's nothing random about it. We're not just throwing stuff out there. The McHugh Kaku Bruce Lee connection is deep, very deep, and it corresponds greatly to Brandon Lee's transition into Christopher Green. There's a script that ties these things together where you wouldn't even need pictures to make the case that person A is person B if they're strong. This one's very strong. And I'm sure they're learning. I mean, so many of these have been given away by their teeth. This one here, did everyone see David Bowie coming back as Jack Stevens? He was using a mouth prop, like a...
Join me. Perhaps you may be able to help solve.
So this is one where David Bowie, after he died, he comes back as Jack Stevens. And the only difference was a wig and a mouthpiece. And this is one of the things we learned from CIA Master Disguise Jonah Mendez, is how you can completely alter your profile with a plumper they put over your gums. You put some false teeth in, you put in a piece in the palate, it even changes your enunciation. Yeah, Jimmy, Dallas Goldbug has been more or less discredited in my mind, and his methodology is flawed. He's saying it's cosmetic surgery and it's these elite royalty doing this and that. And it's like he hasn't made any real connections. And to say, well, this doesn't match that because of surgery. Sorry, you can't make arguments from surgery. What we're suggesting here is not surgery. We're talking about movie magic. And this is what they want to hide. How easy it is for one person to pass themselves off. And something else that kind of caught me too with this Jack Stevens post-mortem appearance, post David Bowie's fake death. One of the things that stood out was there was pixelation on the screen over his face when he was talking. And there was one point where he says, "When David Bowie died, a part of me died." And he smirks. It was like a Robbie Parker smirk. I'm like, okay, why is he winking? A part of me died when David Bowie died. And right after that, there was pixelation on the screen, which I guess you're supposed to believe like a meteor hit a satellite or something. But no, I think they've intentionally put that there just to kind of throw you off. So if you look too close, it could be a glitch. Like they wanted to kind of fuzzy it up. So David Bowie dies, comes back on Sky News the next day. And look, this also ties into something else too. One of his videos, one of his last videos, Lazarus, and this is where the man who fell to earth rises back up. This tied in a few different ways to the story of the Starman going to Mars in the Tesla. Starman, the David Bowie song. The man who fell to earth going back up as Lazarus. Lazarus, the guy who died, and then he shows up again. So, reading the metascripting, looking at Bowie's album Black Star, this Broadway performance of Lazarus ascending, I thought, well, if there's anything to this, we're probably going to see Lazarus returning, just like Lazarus returned from the dead. And what do you know? David Bowie returns on Sky News to make an appearance. Commenter says, have you looked into the Michael Jackson Dangerous cover? They show you the factory. Oh yeah, behind the scenes shows you everything you need to know. Only I mean, these are trade secrets. And here's something too. This you might find hard to believe. In fact, you will find this impossible to believe, and you should. Some of the people who have delved into this are saying that, and I agree with this part, that we need to start looking at actors as actors on and off the screen. Like, do you know for a fact that Brad Pitt, that you see in the magazines, that can't decide if he wants, Aniston or Jolie, week to week, and it's been going on for 40 years? I mean, it's just this endless story. But do you believe that he's a real person, or is that also a character played on the world stage? And that's what I'm saying. There's way too much uniformity in the opinions of these actors and musicians and pop stars for them to not all be puppeteered or scripted by the same central director. So I'm suggesting that we're given nothing but deepfakes, especially in entertainment. So that celebrities are automatically considered to be deepfakes, meaning you don't know who's behind that mask, whether or not they're physically wearing a mask. When they die, when they have a scandal, we don't know. Was Bill Cosby really putting Quaaludes in the Jello? Or is that all just drama for TV? Like, I don't think that O.J. Simpson killed Nicole Simpson. Not only did she not die, but she was participating with him in this race war psyop, and she got a job as an agitator in the media, which seems to be the pattern. And, because that's what they do. They put them in places where they can agitate the sheeple. And she returns as Megyn Kelly. So that's where they end. They don't go to some hidden island. They just get repurposed. But anyway, there is this theory right now that one of the actors, I think his name was Benicio del Toro, is himself not a real person, but is actually someone else wearing a mask. A foolproof, hyper-realistic silicone mask. That this person who's been, like, so in other words, this is meta, where this actor from the screen and from, quote, real life is actually himself just a character. It's far-fetched. But is it? Or is it just basic spycraft? I would say it's just basic spycraft. So for me to say that this particular person has been deep faking in the public's eye for 20 years, I don't think it's a stretch whatsoever. Nor would the master of disguise at the CIA who admitted it. Another interesting part is she stated that this information was classified until just a couple years ago. Okay, so let's continue. Deepfakes everywhere. And again, a pattern. Entertainers get in front of crowds, make a lot of noise, say things that push the agenda forward. These are the agent provocateurs. Pyridoxine Oxide says Face Off movie soft disclosure, no doubt. Another soft disclosure movie, Eyes Wide Shut. Now you know the meaning of the Venetian masks and the party where the elite who control us are all secretly wearing masks. You don't know who they are. But Eyes Wide Shut because it's in your face. But you don't see the mask because you don't have the visual literacy to see through them. And this is what I mean. I believe right now we're going through a reformation and a counter-reformation. So there are people who are waking up who can see through the disguises, and they're being countered by the counter-reformers who control the media, aka the state church, who are saying, don't trust them. Don't listen to them. They'll lead you astray. They'll lead you away from the mainstream. Why do you think they're censoring us? Like, seriously, why else would they be censoring people who are calling stuff in the news fake? They don't want us exposing the deep fakery in space. And look, Joe Rogan's having problems with it where he can't tell if it's a CGI rocket or real. He can't tell if this Porsche is a real car or not. And he's he's perplexed. He's like, I can't.
To artificially different. Stop, please. Keep
Look how sexy that is.
To artificially differentiate, like the way he's got the fender flares. He's making him like he had to glue them on. But the whole car is carbon fiber. So if the whole car is carbon fiber, why did they fake like they had like extensions?
Okay, so I don't want to disappoint you, but that is a rendering and not a picture of an actual car.
I don't want to disappoint you, Joe, but that is a rendering, not a picture of an actual globe. I don't want to disappoint you, Joe, but that is a rendering, not a picture of an actual fill in the blank. I don't want to disappoint you, but that's not a victim, that's a crisis actor. I don't want to disappoint you. It's not a terror attack. That's a propaganda film being presented on the nightly news.
Extensions.
Okay, so I don't want to disappoint you, but that is a rendering and not a picture of an actual car. As far as I know, the actual car does not exist.
Wow, really? Yeah, you've been bamboozled, Joe, on so many levels. Visually illiterate. By the way, I mentioned this last night. Let me go ahead and put a link here. $5 off for the next 5 customers at infiniteplanesociety.com. We have notebooks, mugs, shirts, web blocking stickers. So if you want to blind the all-seeing eye so it can't watch you while you sleep, you can get one of the stickers over there. We have some Mandela affected apparel. This is the design I put on a number of things on mugs and otherwise. The Mandela effect does not concern me with Saint Mandela and the CERN logo. Yeah, exactly, Tim Truth. I don't want to disappoint you, Joe, but it's all a lie and the flat earthers are right. Okay, let me go through my float. I went through my Minds feed. I want to show you that Jimi Hendrix. That Morgan Freeman getting mixed up with Jimi Hendrix thing. And this, look, Aisha Curry. I want to show you this one more time. I think we need to keep hitting this one. Aisha Curry's husband had this little incident on Twitter where they said some deep fakes got leaked. It's not him on those bodies. That's just his head. Well, nobody's actually seen these pictures. I think it's a fake story. And I think this fake story is to prop up, or rather to conceal, that we've been calling her deep faked, that this is in fact Miley Cyrus playing the role on the world stage. She's playing the role of Stephen Curry's wife, wearing one of these bodysuits, kind of like Thor wore in the Avengers, where he had to look a little chubbier. I mean, look at this. That's Miley Cyrus. But this is when she plays the good role. Like it's always a duality with these people. This is where she plays the good stay-at-home mom. Polar opposite from her other character, who is just a character. Okay, speak penguin or die. I have to bring this up at least once per day. Basically, the whole concept of flat Earth is going to die. It's going to die in a stale conference room. It's going to drown in stale hotel pool water. That's what's going to happen to the flat Earth, unless it goes south, unless that becomes the whole topic. Antarctica. Go where the penguins are. Except for the penguins in Africa, the desert penguins, that the Mandela affected want you to believe didn't exist until like last week, until they heard about it. Also, the Mandela affected are the biggest group of pathological liars that I've ever seen. They're lying for attention. Case closed. Last night, the painting of Greta as the Joker sold. Thanks, Tim Truth. Greta as the Joker, which I think is an apt symbol. She's just another crisis actor. If you haven't read Deepfaked, I'll put a link in the chat for you. It's paperback. It's less than $10. Deepfaked explains the whole theory here, what we're describing. How the use of psychological operations has pretty much formed the worldview of the masses. And that to the extent that you go along with this stuff, well, you've been deepfaked. A few other things I want to go over, and then I have to hang it up for the time being. I'll patch these two videos together. I know that they split apart. When the time comes, these must be the first targets. This 5G thing has been, kind of reoccurring as this potential, threat that one day they're going to zap us. And funnily enough, you got to see this new ad by T-Mobile. Nationwide 5G is here, rolling out across America. We're in 5,000 cities. This is only the beginning. We won't stop. And then you have this tower, zapping, I guess, people. Like, this is what's going to sterilize you, make you insane, and give you cancer. That ray right there. So they're about to turn these things on. Look, Joe Rogan, I think, knew about the moon landing, but that's also kind of a farce. To say the moon landing was fake in order to trick the Russians is controlled opposition bullcrap. We're not trying to trick the Russians. The Russians were part of the deepfakery. The whole space program is fake. Also, I'm tired of the word hate being used as an excuse to censor certain ideas. I consider the mainstream media's worldview to be hate speech. I think the rhetoric of climate change hysteria is hate speech. I think the calls to reduce the human population or vacate the planet are hate speech. I think advocating for higher taxes is hate speech against free people. So it's not uniform. Some people get away with hate speech, we don't. So April 13th to April 20th, 2020, we're going to be hosting Celebrate Hate Speech Week. And the idea is you will post banned memes to hashtag celebrate hate. And during this Celebrate Hate Day, or week rather, I'll be live streaming various feeds on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else just to see where these memes are going. And we'll watch them as they get banned. So Big Brother's there with this legion of church ladies burning books, just throwing books on the piles. And we're going to watch real time and videotape them as they do it. Oh, look, they got another meme. And another one, and another one. So just something to keep in mind. I'm going to be bringing this up periodically so it goes somewhere. And you can go ahead and start publishing your hate memes to hashtag celebrate hate. There's just no guarantee that they're going to still be there in April. So I'm saying just get ready now, put them in your folder, and then on 4/13 to 4/20, it's going to be a week nonstop. Here's a link. If anyone is interested in this painting here, I was thinking about the encroaching wall of ignorance and darkness that they use to corral our minds. So, the edge of acceptable discourse, what they call borderline content, is what they're banning. So you can't see anything that they, put beyond a certain boundary, and they keep on constricting the amount of things that we can talk about. So we're basically surrounded, by an edge. So we may as well be on a flat Earth disk. We're on a big disk, and it's flat, and the edge is where they say it is. And now they're watching. Watching where we go, and they're saying, okay, put some new parameters here, and now start walking them all in. And if they don't want to walk towards the center, push them off the edge. Force them into internet ghettos where nobody can hear them. So I made this painting as kind of a way, I called it nescience, which is basically, it doesn't mean ignorance, but it means awareness of what you're ignorant of. So what we're saying is that, hey, we know there's a lot of shit we don't know. And they're putting up a boundary so we can't access it. So if you want this one, I put a link there. It's just a direct link to buy. You can get it on my float.app. They can't censor art, they can't censor music, and I really do want to put a lot of effort into that. Also into books and publications. So if you may have heard me talking about this, but it's going to happen starting in January. We're going to do a print publication once a month, probably 36-page tabloid format. And we're doing this because we need some content that will survive an EMP blast, and also stuff that never has to go through any kind of filtering or censorship. Let's just bypass the filters and have direct communication between the content creators and the content consumers. And getting it in print has a few other advantages, which I'll get into later, especially when it comes to building a network. If you want to read Hoaxed World, How Mass Media Became the One World Religion, here's a link. You can read it free on Smashwords. Alright, I'm going through everything else. I believe I've covered everything I wanted to cover for now. What, they gave Albert Einstein a constellation? Yeah, NASA gave Albert Einstein Godzilla and the Starship Enterprise. Alright, I'm going through all my links here, making sure I haven't missed anything. I think this was it. I've been waiting to see if North Korea was going to launch something on Christmas, and there's also a report of a large meteor that's going to hit us on Christmas, so it may still happen. We may still see some fireworks. I'll be back on later on today. I have a few things I have to take care of, and I will be taking calls. So it'll be open phones. If you want to get on the mailing list, it's linked below. Go to patreon.com/Infinite Plane Society. That gives you the newsletter. It gets you live notifications. And of course, you'll be the first to know once we get into a print newspaper. Yeah, good point here. Let's compete with the Hourglass, the printed newspaper by Extinction Rebellion. Absolutely. I mean, on the cover of it, I have some things, but I want to put some covers that will, really move it. My business model, as far as from a marketing perspective, is more or less based on the National Enquirer for a few reasons. In terms of the visuals, the graphics, the colors, the size, the aesthetics, because it works. It catches your eyes and it sells. So you can't really argue with that. Okay, so anyway, I'll be back later. This is MVP, and subscribe below. Melania's a dude. Joe Rogan's a bitch. Eddie Bravo sucks. Chemtrails are fake. If you believe in chemtrails, you're a fake and evil fool. Nobody died at Sandy Hook. Nobody died at Aurora. Nobody died at Littleton. Nobody died at 9/11. Nobody died at any of the terrorist attacks like Bataclan. Nobody died at Thousand Oaks. Nobody died in Vegas. None of those gay people died at the disco shooting in Orlando. There's no evidence for any of your religious saviors to actually exist. There are no prophecies. There is no end times prophecy. Global warming's a hoax. There's no space junk. There's no satellites. The space station is fake. And like I said earlier, your reality is fake as fuck. It's fake as fuck. But they keep talking about how it's the Americans that drink the Russian piss, and it's not the other way around. That's the only part I believe. Out of all of it, the only part I believe is that those American astronauts are actually drinking Russian piss. That's the only part I find remotely believable. Alright, it's been 12 minutes. Let me go ahead and delete this. I know you are listening, trolls. I know your ears are bleeding. Go ahead and call your mommies. You have a 5-minute intermission. I'll be right back.